Michael Burry is no stranger to making predictions in the stock market. Frequently tweeting, then subsequently deleting his Twitter account, Burry over the past decade has enjoyed increasing attention to his takes on the markets, as his track record gives him credibility. Or does it? Throughout 2021 and 2022, Burry sounded the alarm numerous times about sharp market reversals and corrections. Though some of these bold predictions may yet come to pass, not all of them have achieved much in terms of furthering Burry's allure of a stock market prediction god. Nonetheless, I think it's safe to say Burry is sticking by his word, tweeting last year, habitually being 1 to 2 years early on literally everything, and you too can attain broken clock status. This was after Elon Musk tweeted that Burry was a broken clock, and probably because Burry was very public with his short positions on Tesla, to which he was correct in calling Tesla's stock a bubble. So the first prediction I'd like to highlight took place in April of 2022. Burry's tweets warned of an imminent market crash, so much so that they pointed to an additional 50% loss on the S&P 500. At the time of the tweet in 2022, the S&P 500 was at 4,100. Since then, the S&P has not plummeted by 54% over a year later, rather it's gained 9% since Burry's tweet. Following his advice, however, you still could have netted a nice gain, as the price range in which the S&P has since followed was for the most part under an entry at Burry's tweet. In other words, had you shorted, your position would have sat in the green for almost a year until the last few months where you would have suffered losses. Should this prediction play out, only time will tell. Michael Burry is usually a year or two early on his trades and gets out a few months early, but is usually right in a huge way, whether it was his early value stock picks, legendary short mortgage loans trade, GameStop deep value investments in 2020, or the Tesla short in 2021. So here are a few of his past examples. Burry did his first subprime mortgage deal on May 19, 2005, where he bought $60 million of credit default swaps from Deutsche Bank, $10 million each on 6 different bonds. He sold them all by April of 2008 and made $100 million for himself and $700 million for the investors, where his bet against the housing market paid off. In August 2019, Scion Capital announced that it had bought 3 million shares for $16 million in gaming and electronics retailer GameStop. This means that Burry accumulated shares of GameStop at approximately $5.52 a share on average. While he did not capture the parabolic run-up in the GME stock to $438 a share in January of 2021, he did accumulate his position in the low single-digit prices, so he likely doubled, tripled, or quadrupled his money, at least whenever he exited in the fourth quarter of 2020. We don't know when he exited, but we do know that he missed the entire Wall Street Bets / Reddit 2021 run-up. So he was very close to pulling off the ultimate big long. It appears he gave up and exited his large positions in Tesla puts and ARK puts, and reduced his holdings dramatically in the last Q3 2021 13F filing. He believed hyperinflation was inevitable, but had trouble with his bearish stock bets going against him in the short term, causing him to exit. He was very close to having another 2 huge short positions pay off exponentially due to the position size and leverage of the put options, but that was just too early. On February 19, 2021, Burry began warning about inflation and excessive government stimulus. When he turned bearish in early 2021, he was in the minority, as most people in the financial world were bullish and central banks and politicians believed inflation was transitory. At the time he warned about inflation, it was still under the Fed's target of 2%. Even before 2021 though, Burry told Bloomberg in April of 2020, just weeks after the first lockdowns in the US, that the post-pandemic reopening could cause inflation to spike. He said, quote, "When we start working and playing again, inflation may be in store." Burry ramped up his inflation warnings in February, and he cautioned that stimulus checks and the Fed's continued pumping of liquidity into the markets, the reopening of large parts of the economy, were likely to drive prices higher. "Prepare for inflation," Burry tweeted on the 19th. "Inflation pressure building. The Fed is monetizing $80 billion of Treasury debt per month, and now comes trillions in stimulus/debt, plus the reopening." So Burry highlighted America's inflation woes in the 1970s, and Weimar Germany's hyperinflation in the 1920s as cautionary tales about the risks of soaring prices. He also flagged Buffett's description of inflation as a tax on capital, saying it discourages companies from investing by reducing their real returns and acts as an implicit tax on investors by eating into their purchasing power. In the summer of 2022, Burry seemed to be predicting a market crash later in the year. Since then, however, the S&P has recovered 20%, making only small moves lower. And around the same time, the summer of 2022, Burry was explaining why he sees a recession coming, a consumer depletion of savings. The US GDP growth hit 2.4% in the second quarter of this year, meaning the US isn't technically in a recession, if you believe this GDP number. Burry in September of last year also tweeted that the white-collar employment bubble is bursting right before our eyes, and the longer it takes the redundancy to disappear, the more permanent the decline in employment will be, work from home jobs will in time be seen as a culprit. So what is the white-collar employment bubble? Well, in short, the bubble essentially refers to the fact that at the moment, unskilled and semi-skilled workers are in short supply, but there are plenty of white-collar workers. On top of that, the unskilled and semi-skilled workers often work in essential jobs that are considered to be less likely to be lost in the current economic downturn than those doing redundant white-collar jobs. So as Business Insider wrote last year, a growing number of economists expect at least a mild recession to materialize in 2023, and signs point to it resembling the downturn of the early 1990s. That slump saw white-collar or high-income office workers face a heightened risk of job loss, while those in blue-collar sectors like mining and manufacturing generally fared much better than in previous recessions.